Hey guys, this is Josh here with Trillium Wild Edibles, and today I wanted to do an identification video on a plant known as broadleaf dock. Now this plant is in the Rumex family, which means it's also related to curly dock and our domestic buckwheat. If we look very closely here, what we can see in the nodes of this plant are these seed clusters. This is the very beginning of the seeds of broadleaf dock. Now, broadleaf dock and curly dock both produce seeds like this, and these seeds are technically edible. However, you do have to remove the shell of the seed, which can be an extreme pain, and it's also very time-consuming. But if we look very closely, we can see how many seeds are actually around just this one node. Taking a further look back again, we can see how many of these seed clusters rise up throughout these stalks. And we're going to notice multiple stalks producing seeds and seed clusters at the very top of this plant. This is one of the things that makes it very good for grain manufacturing to make your own flour and breads and things like that. However, you want to keep in mind to use about 15 to 20% of the total amount of flour of this flour in your recipe. So let's take a closer look at this plant and learn how to identify it. If we look very closely at these leaves, we're going to notice how large they are. These leaves are very broad, hence its name broadleaf dock, but they're also very long. These leaves are going to be growing in kind of an oval shape or kind of an egg shape, as we can see here. At the very tip, we're going to notice the leaves are going to come to a point. They're not rounded at the tip, they're pointed. The sides or margins of the leaves appear to be smooth from a distance, but the main thing we can see from a distance is how they wave just a little bit. If we look very closely at the margins or the sides of the leaves, we're going to notice this very slightly rippled appearance that we can see right here. And this is simply because of the waves along the sides. We can also notice that these margins are smooth. There are no teeth. There are no lobes of any kind on the sides of these leaves. If we look down here towards the base of the plant, we're going to notice that the leaves are going to get much larger. That right there is my hand for a good comparison as far as the size is concerned of these leaves. As we get towards the top of the plant, we're going to notice the leaves becoming smaller with the margins being even more wavy and rippled. Just like we can see on this little leaf here, you can see it's actually a lot smaller than even my index finger. The leaf pattern on broadleaf dock is generally an alternating pattern. However, there can be multiple sets of leaves coming out of a node. Like right here, for instance, we can see this leaf petiole coming out right here of this node, and we can also see these other stems coming out as well. And each one of these stems will produce leaves and seed pods. And as we go up those stems, we're going to notice a leaf and another leaf, and they're going to be alternating up the stem. And if we look at this node here, we can see what I'm talking about with this very large broadleaf coming out here, and this other smaller leaf coming out of the exact same node with the stem coming out. So this would be kind of like an opposite pattern, but since they're coming out of the same node and the nodes will alternate, curly dock is considered to have an alternating pattern with its leaves. Right there is a close-up view of what I'm talking about with this leaf and this leaf both coming out of the exact same node that this stem is, and we can even see a small seed cluster starting to develop right here. And whenever we're looking at each node, it's important to pay attention to the base of the node where it connects to the main stem of the plant like we have here, and we're going to notice this little sheath that covers the base of the leaf petiole or the leaf stem. We're also going to notice a color difference. We can see some green, but we can also see this reddish purple tinging occurring right along this portion of the main stem and here along the base of the petiole, going all the way up that petiole with these little bitty spots. Also from this angle, if we look at the petiole, we're going to notice this little distinct groove that runs the length of the petiole or the length of the leaf stem. Another thing that we're going to notice about these leaves is the vein that runs through them in the center is very distinct. It also has a much lighter appearance than the rest of the leaf with this very distinct red purplish tinging running through it, which will get darker once we get towards the base of the leaf, right where it connects to the leaf stem. However, this plant does actually take on a couple of different growth forms, especially in the early spring and mid-spring before it really starts to shoot up its stems or its stalks. So let's take a look at one of those. Now right now we are looking at the rosette, the basal rosette of a broadleaf dock that grows in my yard. This is a very common sight in lawns, especially around where there's been domesticated animals like cows or pigs or horses. Now right away, one of the first things that we're going to notice is the fact that there are a whole lot of leaves here, and this is actually a couple of different plants, but they're very tightly grouped together. These leaves are much whiter than anything else you're going to find in your yard, most likely. On close inspection of these early rosettes, we're going to notice the margins of the leaves have a lot more of these waves to them, just like we can see here on this leaf. And this also gives some people the impression that these leaves are slightly toothed because they can also have, instead of these large ripples, they can also have these very much smaller waves and ripples along the margins that give this slightly toothed appearance. However, these leaves are not toothed. They are smooth on the margins. They just have various sets of waves along their margins, giving this plant a couple of different growth forms and growth patterns to really keep an eye out for. From a far back distance, it's also easier to see all of these big basal rosettes growing in your yard, as I'm sure you guys can tell how easily these actually stick out. Very easy to notice this plant, and it's also extremely easy to identify. This plant is edible in various ways, from its leaves to its shoots to its seeds. Also from a distance, if we look at the older version of broadleaf dock, we can see how distinct its growth form and growth pattern is. We can notice those very large, wavy, alternating leaves. We can notice those distinct seed clusters at the very top. And if we compare it to the other plants around, we're going to notice how easily this plant sticks out. So I hope this video helps you guys to identify this delicious and popular wild edible known as broadleaf dock. I thank all of you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.